Hello, my name is Tess from Nerdy Designs by Tess, and today we'll be going over how to stitch using Aida fabric. Now, I've heard a couple pronunciations on this type of fabric, so apologies if I got it wrong, or if you know it is something else, but I do want to let you know that this is going to be 14 count Aida fabric, and I'm going to be using off-brand thread today. However, what I suggest using if you are doing this as not practice but an actual piece is using DMC thread. That is the thread that's always worked for me, has the least amount of knots, doesn't break as easy, all that good stuff. Now, the reason I'm going to be using a small piece, and I suggest starting out with a small piece such as this first if you have the chance, is because there's a couple different techniques on how to start and how to stop your thread, and there's a couple different stitch methods. So just having a piece like this allows you to work on it and not have to worry about messing up or ruining your piece or ruining the fabric for your piece. I'm also going to be using this throwaway fabric that I have. As you can see, it dropped on the floor, got a little messy. I started using a needle that was a bit too big, so what happened is it made the holes too big. It was just not my favorite start, so I decided to scrap it, but this is going to be perfect for just practicing. That way, if I don't like it, I don't have to feel intimidated, and I could just kind of either try to wash the fabric and then see what kind of detergents work best or what kind of products work best for cleaning different stains, or I could just completely throw it away and I don't have to stress about it. But that's me. Now, first thing I want to let you know is that this is skein of thread. So what I'm going to do is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the number down here, and I'm going to take this tail and I'm going to start pulling. Now, I have used this stuff a lot, so I usually go 3. However, I suggest doing maybe 3 at the most and possibly even less if this is your first time using this kind of thread. That way, if for some reason it starts tangling up on you or you're just not very confident about it, you don't have that much tail to work with and it's not going to be as daunting. So I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut that thread right here. And now we should have this piece of string or thread that has multiple threads to it. So I know it's kind of hard to see here in this video. I'm trying to make it a little bit closer while still being in focus, but this will actually be able to be split. There should be 6 here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take just one of these pieces and I'm going to start pulling. And I know my camera's just kind of in and out of focus, but it's going to start bundling up on me as I pull it through. Ooh! Oh Lord, heaven help me. Oh no, why is it doing that? Okay, I think we're good. Eek. But what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to wrap my pinky around that end, and that way the string that's coming through just stays straight. And normally what I like to do is I'll just pull it back. I'll just kind of hold the bundle in my hand and I'll run it through my fingers. That way it doesn't get tangles, because tangles will happen, but if they're avoidable, that's the best. So I'm going to take both ends. So here's one end. Let me find the other end. There we go. I'm going to put these together, trying to make them as even as possible. And then I have my needle. And this part up here with the hole in it is called the eye of the needle, and I need to put those 2 ends through the eye. Now, sometimes that's easier, sometimes that is very difficult for people, just kind of depends on what works for you. There are tools that can help you thread it if you are struggling with your thread and like threading it through the eye of that needle. Now, what I have is I have this end here, which has a loop, and then here are my 2 ends. Not perfect, but we will make it work. But I want to let you know that these 2 ends should be shorter, so they should not line up with this end. You want this end to be longer, because what we're about to do, so we're about to take our fabric and we're going to thread the needle through. Now, the best way I could kind of describe this is when you're holding your piece, think of a fish, where the fish is jumping up out of the water, or maybe a dolphin, because dolphins jump out of the water. But it's going to go up out of the water, down, up, down, up. So if you think of this as the surface of the water, it's always going to go up out of the water first, then dive back down, up and down, up and down. It just depends on where we want it to dive through. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to start on my left-hand side, and again, we are diving up out of the water. So I'm going to poke my needle through one of the holes in this fabric. So if I turn this to the side again, kind of like the surface of the water, you could see that the pointy part of the needle is going up out of the water. And I'm going to start pulling that through, but we are not going to pull it through all the way. Now the whole point of cross stitching is to make X's. So in order to make an X, what I need to do is I need to go from this part where I jumped out of the water, I need to go diagonal. So one to the right and one up is going to be right here, and I'm going to dive back down into the water. So let me try to move this out of the way a little bit so it's easier to see. But now what it looks like is I have this tail, it's going up out of the water, and then it goes up this way, and then I have the tail going back down into the water. And as I pull, I know it's a little hard to focus, I'm so sorry, but do you see how it has this diagonal? Now, if you keep pulling, what's going to happen is that thread's going to go right on through. So here's the tricky part. What you're going to do is you're going to take your needle, that tip, and you're going to run it right through that hoop. So when you pull, it stays nice and snug. And you can kind of see I'm pulling on my thread, and that is not coming out because now we've created this knot here. So that should not come out. Now I'm going to come back to here. I went up out of the water down here, and then I went back into the water to create this diagonal. Now the whole point of cross stitches is it's cross. So in order to make this diagonal line across, I need to do another diagonal in the opposite direction. Now we just dove back into the water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle, excuse me, and so this is the back side, this is the front, this is the back, and I'm going to actually do one up. Now the reason I'm saying up and not down is because we are looking at the back part of our fabric right now. This is the front, so you see how that needle is poking out one below where we just dove back into the water. I put in quotation marks. So I'm going to pull, and something I really want to make sure of is not to get these two ends stuck into the fabric. So sometimes I might have to pull a little bit, and you see how that pulls these ends. That way they don't get tangled in, because if you get roped up in it, and then you're not going to be able to pull your needle off of your thread. So looking at this, we are now down here. We had just pulled this back through, so we dove up out of the water, and now we need to dive back down into the water. So in order to make this an X, what I need to do is I need to go one to the left, one up, so that's that top left side, and we're going to dive back into the water. So I'm going to pull, and that makes a perfect X with little bits of fluff, because this is not proper DMC thread. And now we have that little X. Now what you could do is you could start to right next to it. So if I start right next to it, I'm going to start here because I want these squares touching. So I have to start here if I want these squares touching. If I start here, then what's going to happen is I'm going to have a gap, and I don't want a gap. So I want to start right at that bottom right-hand side. So we're diving up out of the water, and I'm pulling through, dropping my needle for some reason. I'm going to go one diagonal to the right, top right. I pull through. I'm going to start at the bottom left, pull through. I go to the top. I said bottom left. This is the top right. I'm so sorry. I go to the top left. I pull through. I start at the bottom left. I pull through. I go to the top right. I pull through. I go to the bottom right. I pull through. I get you. I'm so sorry. I go to the top left. I pull through. And now you can see what I mean by these stitches being side by side. If I accidentally gapped them, so instead of starting right at the bottom left, literally on top of literally poking through that last X that I made, what's gonna happen is when you go to make that X, it's gonna have that gap. And especially when you're trying to make a picture, unless it says you need a gap in between, and that is going to make your piece look really weird. So that's the whole reason I'm saying when you start your new X and your pattern says they need side by side, when you start your new X, it has to be touching the previous X. Now, let me take this out real quick. So this is what I mean by you need your ends, because if I need to take this needle out for whatever reason, if my ends aren't wrapped up in my piece, like let's say I made a mistake, all I need to do is take my needle and I could actually go back and pull out. This is called frogging, by the way. I'm frogging my last few stitches. Now, let me re-thread these ends. Let's say I am done. I only need to make 3 stitches for my piece. So I am done with this and I need to end my thread. One of the ways we could end this, and I think one of the cleanest ways, is we could take our needle gently, because you don't want to poke all the way through, run that needle through the last few stitches. So you can see it on this side, but when I flip, you cannot see the needle on the other side. If you can see your needle on this side, like the silver's poking out, that means you went through your fabric. And we want to go through the stitches, not through the fabric. And I'm going to pull. And then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut. Now be careful when you cut. I like to leave myself a little bit of a tail. See, that's not too much, but it's a little bit. Because if you cut your threads, what's going to happen is all of this is going to unravel. And this cross stitch takes some time, so you don't want to unravel your work. Now, let's say I need to start another 3 stitches or so. But I have this tail here and no longer have a loop, but I don't want to waste my thread. I work really hard to make the money I do have and I don't want to go wasting any. So what I'm going to do is just like I started on the first one, I'm going to start, that dolphin's going to go up out of the water. So think of it as the sharp part is going to be towards you. We're coming up out. So I started at the bottom left. I'm going to go to the top right. So, oops, sorry, I flipped it the wrong way. This is how it's gonna look. So we went up out of the water, you can see the loop, and then I'm coming back down into the water. So the start is at the bottom left, my needle is currently at the top right, and I'm gonna pull, but I'm not gonna pull all the way, because if I pull all the way, then the thread will come out. So I'm gonna leave myself a bit of a tail, and I'm gonna take these through because I don't wanna wrap these up, but that is up to you. So again, because I'm upside down, instead of going down, I need to go up. So when I flip it, it's actually down. So remember, anytime you flip your fabric, you have to think opposite, at least up and down. Right and left are still the same, but your up and down are to be inverted. So, and I don't want to pull all the way through, but I need to leave myself, let me separate these so they're easier to see. So I have my tail on my left side, and I have this hoop, let's call it, this loop hoop on the right. Now, the nice thing about doing this is that if you pull this bottom edge, it will start pulling that end. So I want to leave a little bit out because my fingers aren't the thinnest things. So I want to make sure I have a little bit of tail to touch. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this loop, so it's on this side, and I'm just going to flop it over. And now I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to gently start pulling. And I like to hold this, but that's me. This is not a requirement. It's just something I like to do. And I'm not going to pull all the way. And I'm going to make sure it doesn't wrap around my fabric. Goodness. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that tip. There it goes. I didn't realize I wasn't. Why when I put my fingers here does it stop focusing? I'm going to flip this tail the opposite way. So now my hoop or my loop is this way, and my tail, so this is towards the right and my tail's towards the left. And I'm gonna hold that tail. And I'm gonna try to do this so that y'all can see. I'm right-handed, not left-handed, so I apologize. So I'm holding down that tail, and when I go to pull my needle, what this should do is it should cinch and pull right on this tail. So then when you go to pull on it, just like I did before, that should be locked into place. It should not come undone. So flipping back, let me teach you the what I believe is called the Dutch method. That was what I was told when I was learning this. Excuse me. So instead of finishing that X, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a whole bunch of diagonals. So I start at the bottom left, I go to the top right, and then I go one down, and I pull through, and I go to the top right. So I essentially halfway did half of my 3 cross stitches. So now I said I needed 3, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. Now that I did my 3 that I need, I'm going to go to the bottom right and then top left, pull through, and I'm going to finish that X. And then I'm going to start in the middle stitch, start at the bottom right, go to the top left, pull through, bottom right, top left, pull through. Now, these should look pretty much the same. We did different methods of stitching them, but the end product should look the same. So it's whatever easier for you. A lot of people like using this Dutch method because it saves a little bit of time and it saves a little bit of string. It also, some people say it's easier to count as you go along. So let's say you're doing a really big piece and you need to count out 15, 20, even up to 50 stitches. It's hard to count X's individually, so if you do the Dutch method and then you go across your row, all those 50 stitches, and then you go back, it's just easier to count those half stitches first. But I'm going to finish this up the same way as before, and I'm just going to run my thread back through some of the back of these stitches. Again, I'm going to check to make sure my needle didn't poke through, so we look good. And then I'm going to pull through. And then I'm going to cut. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to translate this into a picture. So I'm going to take this, which is again my scrap. That way if I don't like it or I don't do it right, I can just redo it. And I want to show you the picture I'm using, which is, can I make this a little smaller for you guys to see? I can. I just have this glare, yucky, but we'll make it work. So what I did is, you could see I have where my middle is, and I like to start in the middle because that's easier for me. So I could just fold my fabric in half, find the middle of my fabric, find the middle of my piece. Especially with large pieces, this is nice to work from the middle out. That way if you accidentally miscount, your piece is perfectly centered. So let's say you start at the top left and then you accidentally miscount. Well, now the rest of your piece is going to be cut off and the fabric's going to look uneven in the long run. But if you start in the middle, the edges of your fabric should be aligned perfectly. So this is my reference photo, just so you guys know. It is a free photo I found online, so it's nothing fancy. But what I am going to do, and I'm going to start roughly in the middle, honestly, because this is scrap, I'm not going to care about it that much. So I have my fabric. This is a hoop, so I've already put it in my hoop. Again, I'm going to start in the middle, but you can see, like my dolphin, I am going up from the bottom, out of the water. And then I start at bottom left. I'm going to go to top right. I'm not going to pull all the way through because I have that tail that I don't want to mess up. Remember, I flipped it over, so instead of going down, I have to go up one. And I'm not going to pull all the way through, or else what will happen is I will pull that tail out, and I need it to kind of cinch that thread. I'm going to push it down, flop over this loop, flop my tail back towards the right, and I'm going to gently start pulling, and under my finger, it's just going to cinch that. And I like to tug on it a couple times to make sure I did it right, as we could always go back. So my middle, this shows I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in my pattern to go down. So unlike the first three that I showed you on the little scrap piece. Instead of going to the right, I need to go down. So I went from the bottom left to the top right, and then the bottom right to the top left. Now I need to do one under that. So I like to always start at the bottom left, so I'm going to do that again. So I go bottom left, top right, bottom right, coming up through, top left, bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left, bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left. Beautiful. And now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, so I need one more. Bottom left, top right, bottom right. Ooh, I hit ya. I'm so sorry. Top left. And that's my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, so I could actually just go on my pattern. And I like to print my patterns out or have it on a device such as like a computer or iPad that I'm able to mark off stitches as I go, so I can follow that pattern. Now, this video is just to teach us kind of the basics of stitching, of starting and stopping. So if you would like a video about like how to follow along with a pattern, how to match up colors, that kind of stuff, I could definitely do that. And if you have any clarifying questions that maybe I could go back and make another video on, show something different, maybe show in a different light, a different angle, I could definitely do that. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.